Welcome, friends, to our YouTube site, Fred and John Talks. I'm John, and this is
Fred.
Welcome. We hope you'll join us. We hope you'll like us on Facebook and subscribe and make comments on what we say and what we do. We're having fun, and we hope you will too. Today we're going to do something, again, a little different, somewhat based on Fred's past history and knowledge of poetry and his love of poetry. And so we've talked about this off and on for a while, and we've decided to introduce you to some poetry that we think is interesting and educational and stimulating. And I'll let Fred take it away with an introduction.
Thanks a lot, John.
Sure.
Well, first of all, you may notice I'm not wearing a baseball hat today. I'm wearing a hat that I call my beatnik hat.
Your beatnik hat?
Yes.
Oh my God, okay.
This is for the older generation. Back in the 60s, and I think extending into the early 70s, the word beatnik, I don't know where they came up with the word, but it described a certain kind of person, hip person, and so on. And as a matter of fact, in those days, poetry clubs were very popular. I read an article, for example, it was an article about a club in New York City, and the purpose of it was for people to come together and share their love of poetry, but they had to get up one by one at the microphone and recite a poem from memory.
Oh.
But not only that, those among them who had yet to get up there and recite their first poem, they were called virgins until they recited their first poem. So that's a introduction to why I have this hat on and to people's love of poetry. Well, here's my story that John alluded to that I want to tell to set up. It's the introductory section of today's episode. When I was in graduate school, so this goes back, I started graduate school in 1989 and graduated in 1992. But right from the start, my graduate studies coincided with the fact that I was engaged to be married, and my fiancée opted out of the whole thing. She canceled the engagement and the wedding, and here I am in my first year of graduate school. It was a big blow, but it has a serendipitous story to it. So I was in a class, my graduate studies were in training to become a counselor, and the class was how to do group therapy. But the professor took a very unorthodox but very effective approach. He told us on the first day of class, he said, what we're going to do is we're going to sit in a circle and we're going to do group therapy with himself as the therapist, of course, and he would make teaching points throughout. But he said, what I'm going to do is invite you to share your personal lives as much or as little as you want. And so it was going to, I call it a process class. He never wrote on a blackboard or gave a lecture or anything.
Never used the chalkboard?
Never used the chalkboard.
Oh my gosh.
So I can remember there were a lot of tears, a lot of laughs. People got to know each other, and we learned how to do facilitate group therapy all at the same time. So it was a threefer. So when my turn came to talk, I said something along these lines. I said, you know, what's going on in my life is I am really hurting over a recently broken engagement. And I said, I have all this romance built up inside me, and no girl, you know. Or as the saying goes, I was all dressed up for the dance, you know, and no date. And so I told them to cope with that, I started to memorize poetry. And I really built up quite a repertoire. But I said to them, I love memorizing poetry, but I can't find people to listen to this. Who wants to listen to a guy reciting poetry, you know?
We have a captive audience now.
Yeah. So the professor said, why don't you recite a poem for us right now? And so I did. The poem I recited, the poem where it all got started, what I'm about to tell you, all got started was a poem by John Keats called Ode to a Nightingale.
Famous.
Look it up. I'm not going to read from that today. We're going to read and recite some other poems. But you could have heard a pin drop in that room. People were transfixed. I can feel the vibe. I had my eyes closed the whole time, but I could feel the vibe, the silence, and how attentive they were. And after I finished and the class ended, a woman from the class came up to me, and she was, you know, her excitement about what she had just heard. She told me, Fred, my husband and I and my grown daughters love poetry. Will you come over our house for dinner and recite some of the poems you've memorized?
Excellent idea.
Yeah. And I said, yes, absolutely. So I went over there, and it was a magical night. And not only did I recite, but they got out their books. They didn't memorize poetry, but they got out some of their poetry books. And it wasn't only me. It wasn't a one-man show. You know, the husband and wife and the grown daughters, they shared some of their favorite poems. Now, that was the beginning of what gradually became known as, and I dubbed it, potluck and poetry parties. And I'm here to tell you, people came out of the woodwork as word spread that we were having these poetry gatherings. And then we suggested, hey, why doesn't everybody bring a covered dish? We'll break bread together and have a meal. And then, in my case, I recited poems from memory. In a couple other cases, people recited a poem, but not many. But everybody brought a favorite poem and read it. And then it even increased and enlarged in scope to people. I remember it was a husband and wife, and they, with the scripts in front of them, they recited, they read some scenes from Shakespeare plays. Others brought their original poetry that they had written. Then we had a woman who played the harp, and she brought her harp. It was a small, not one of the big ones, but it was a smaller harp, and she had the voice of an angel. So it became my therapy, and I made so many new friends. So it was a wonderful, wonderful venture.
I have some comments on that, Fred.
Yeah.
So, you know, we started this whole YouTube series channel for making friendships, staying connected, meeting people, and this is exactly what happened, isn't it?
Exactly what happened.
And you ventured off into something you would never have thought about, which was reading poetry, and it became a group. And they brought food, gatherings, so you had relationships forming, people interacting over a common theme. Wonderful idea. And one other thing that struck me about what you said is that when you said that you had been full of love and full of passion, and you had been disappointed in love, this reminds me of a book that I've read in the last couple of years. It's titled Leave No Footprint by Connor Knighton, K-N-I-G-H-T-O-N. Connor Knighton was a news media person in New York City whose fiance called off his wedding. And he was so dismayed and so disappointed that he took a year off and he went from all of the national parks in the United States, Acadia, from A to Z, Zion. And he did a nice little synopsis. It's really, it's not a pictorial book, it's not a pictorial representation of the parks, but he describes each park in detail, and he made appointments with the park rangers who took him to places inside the parks that usually visitors don't get to see. So I would recommend that you check out this book. It's called Leave No Footprints by Conor Knighton. It just kind of struck me that there was a comparison of something good came from kind of a negative.
Exactly.
Seemingly a negative.
I sometimes joke and I'm saying, I'm glad she broke the engagement because I made all these new friends and I got a new hobby.
Yeah.
But that was his therapy.
His therapy. And he produced a book.
And he produced the book.
Yeah.
And also, I might throw in, because we've talked about this subject before, it's a way to grieve by doing something creative. Think of how many songwriters write songs about their heartaches.
Yes.
You know?
Common, very common.
Yeah. Well, I am going to try, although I have a cheat sheet here. You have to remember, this goes back to 1989, and you know, we're in October of 2023, but some of the poems I recited were very, very long, and of course I don't remember all those. Sometimes I remember the beginning and the end, but some of the poems have stayed with me. For example, some of the poems of Robert Frost that are a little shorter and so on. But I have a favorite poem on a morbid subject, but it's a great poem by John Donne called Death Be Not Proud. And it goes like this. I'm going to try to recite it, and I will have to beg your pardon if I have to look, because I'm a little nervous right now. It was many years ago.
You're on camera.
Yeah.
Millions of people watching.
Yeah. Death be not proud, though some have called thee mighty and dreadful, for thou art not so. For those whom thou thinkest thou dost overthrow, die not, poor death, nor yet canst thou kill me. From rest and sleep, which but thy pictures be, much pleasure, then from thee much more must flow, and soonest our best men with thee do go, rest of their bones and souls delivery. Thou art slave to kings, chance, and desperate men, and dost with poison, war, and sickness dwell. And poppier charms can make us sleep as well, and better than thy stroke. Why swellest thou then? One short sleep past, we wake eternally, and death shall be no more. Death, thou shalt die.
Good, Fred. Hope you enjoyed that. The next one is going to be The Hound of Heaven. Is that correct? And we talked about this one earlier.
Yes, we did. I'm going to need my glasses for this because I got some notes on this. The Hound of Heaven is said to be one of the greatest religious poems ever written. I memorized this poem. When I showed John how, because I printed it out, when I showed John how long it is, he was amazed. But there was a time when I recited this poem from memory. But let me say, this is not an easy read. It has a lot of the Old English, the King's English. It has quite a few words that I had to look up to see what they even meant. I'm just going to give you a flavor of it by reading the beginning. But before I do that, let me tell you why it's called The Hound of Heaven and what it's about. It's about a man who believed that if he embraced God, that he would have to relinquish all of his other pleasures, all that he enjoyed in life, even simple pleasures. He believed that if he embraced God, he would have to relinquish all of that. Only at the end to come to the realization that it was only if he embraced God that he could experience true and lasting pleasure. And the reason why it's called the Hound of Heaven is because the man is running away from God throughout the whole poem, and God is in pursuit of him throughout the whole poem. Thus, the hound, he's hounding him. God is chasing him to not to pester him, but to win his heart, which he eventually does.
That's a wonderful interpretation of the poem, and it's so kind of emblematic of the way many lead their lives today. Is that they think they...
Oh, say more on that.
They are... We all think we're powerful. We all think we're so important. We all believe that we're more important than the next person sometimes. I don't think we give a lot of consideration to others on occasions. It's all about me, 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 and me, and not even thinking about the good Lord on the other hand. And it's, of course, a common thought that we're all way too materialistic. And if we go with God or have a religious bent, that we're going to be weaker or somehow not achieve or not be as important. And often many of us find later on in life that, gee, we missed out on being more faithful and having faithful friends and having the relationships.
And all the blessings that brings with it.
And all the blessings it brings with it. And this person was hounded by those kind of, I guess, memories.
The God who would not give up on him.
Yeah, would not give up.
So, as I said, it's long, but I just want to give you a taste of it, a teaser, to encourage you, even though I said it's a hard poem. It's a poem to be studied, and you look up words and so on like that. But this is how it starts. This is the man talking. I fled him down the nights and down the days. I fled him down the arches of the years. I fled him down the labyrinthine ways of my own mind, and in the midst of tears I hid from him and under running laughter. Up vistaed hopes I sped, and shot precipitated adown titanic glooms of chasmed fears from those strong feet that followed after, but with unhurrying chase and unperturbed pace. Deliberate speed, majestic instancy they beat, more instant than the feet. All things betray, this is God, all things betray thee who betrayest me.
Well, there you are, Fred. The ups and downs of life. We go there. We all have ups, we all have downs, and we're always in a hurry to get to the next thing, the next best thing.
Yeah.
And what we really need is something else. Go, 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 but it's following us. He follows us.
For Americans to hear, you need to slow down a little bit.
Big time.
There's anathema to it. They can't. My oldest son right now is struggling in his job because, even when he's not working, he's worried about, his job, and, he doesn't have much of a social life. Now he's developing symptoms of high anxiety, and now he's also, I'm very concerned about my son, but it's a typical American. Now he's having medical problems, heart palpitations, gastrointestinal problems. Let me throw this in because it's important for Americans to know this. There was an international study done on adults, working adults, and their stress levels. And it was, like I said, multi-country study. And they asked people a lot of questions, but what I'm going to focus on is they asked people, how often are you stressed out? How do you experience burnout? How high a stress level do you walk around with on a daily basis? And I'll save America to last because that's the punchline. The highest percentage of a few companies, of a few countries, was 35% of the adults being reported being chronically stressed out. And then the highest country on the planet was America, 55%. That's 20 percentage points higher than 35. 55% of the working Americans reported being chronically stressed out.
Do you think, Fred, I have a thought about this. Do you think that that kind of statistical analysis and the comparison of countries, do you think it has anything to do with when people are stressed and tired out and frustrated, do they become lonely? Do they become more introverted? Do they tend to socialize less? Do they try and make fewer connections, meaningful connections? I just wonder if this feeds into loneliness and the lack of connectedness, which is what we want to see happen in the world.
Yes,
and relationships.
Yes, it does. And I can attest from my work as a therapist, especially with men, but even some women, they're working machines. And when I ask them about their friendships and social connections, there's not much there. I read an article last year with the title, "Americans Have Fewer and Fewer Friends." And one of the reasons for that is that they just focus on work. And so, yes, that plays into and exacerbates isolation, loneliness.
Fewer friends means loneliness.
Mental health problems.
Yes.
We've talked about this before. Let's move on to the next poem.
I like this one. We're going to have fun with this.
We're going to have fun with this. We're going to do a little something different. This poem is called, it's a famous poem, The Charge of the Light Brigade, and it's based on a true story. It's by Alfred Lord Tennyson. In 1854, during the Crimean War, a disastrous military engagement took place at Balaclava.
I thought that was a dessert. No, that's baklava. That's a Greek dessert. Baklava.
I bet you the soldiers wish it was a dessert. The poem pays tribute to a brigade of valiant British soldiers who obeyed their commander's instructions to attack Russian troops. But the command to do so turned out to be a spectacular blunder as they were massacred. And keep in mind that word blunder, because you're going to hear it from the poem. There was a movie made about this. I didn't particularly care for the movie myself, but the poem is fantastic. John and I are going to take turns reading it. Half a league, half a league, half a league, onward. All in the valley of death rode the 600. Forward the light brigade, charge for the guns, he said. Into the valley of death rode the 600. Forward the light brigade, was there a man dismayed? Not though the soldier knew someone had blundered. Theirs not to make reply, theirs not to reason why, theirs but to do and die. Into the valley of death rode the 600.
Cannon to the right of them, cannon to the left of them, cannon in front of them, volleyed and thundered, stormed it with shot and shell, boldly they rode and well, into the jaws of death, into the mouth of hell, rode the 600. Flashed all their sabers bare, flashed as they turned in air, sabering the gunners there, charging an army while all the world wondered. Plunged in the battery smoke, right through the line they broke, Cossack and Russian reeled from the saber stroke. Shattered and sundered, then they rode back, but not the 600.
And the last two stanzas. Cannon to right of them, cannon to left of them, cannon behind them, volleyed and thundered. Stormed at with shot and shell, while horse and hero fell. They that had fought so well came through the jaws of death, back from the mouth of hell. All that was left of them, left of 600. When can their glory fade? Oh, the wild charge they made, all the world wondered. Honor the charge they made, honor the light brigade, noble 600.
It's almost reminding me, Fred, of sometimes life day to day. Battles in front of us, battles beside us, battles on the phone calls, battles on the emails, battles on the, the text messages. Fortunately, we came through. We're part of the, not the 600.
The survivors.
Don't forget, we just went through a pandemic where over 1 million plus Americans died. So they had battles in front of them, battles in bed, battles in hospitals.
Yeah.
Be thankful for being alive if you are part of the population that survived COVID.
Amen.
What's next?
Okay, yeah. I saved the best for last. We're gonna wrap up. We're gonna wrap up with this.
Oh, not about baseball. I can't stand it.
It's about baseball.
Oh no.
Give me a second. This is not beatnik time. This is baseball time.
You got to change your hat, Fred.
I gotta change my hat. Okay, another very famous poem called Casey at the Bat. And it's long. We're not going to read the whole thing. I'm just going to give you a couple blurbs.
They'll get the feeling of it.
But it's about this fictitious great baseball player and great hitter, and he strikes out. And it's interesting to note that this gave rise to, I think, another author who wrote a poem called Casey's Revenge. So for our listening audience, if you've never read this, if you're a baseball lover especially, but even if you're not, this is a classic poem. Read Casey at the Bat and then look up Casey's Revenge.
Casey's Revenge.
And then I think, don't quote me on this, I think there's even a third one about Casey. Yeah, they started to build on it like sequels to a movie. Yeah. Casey at the Bat. I'll read, I think, the beginning and the end. This is quite long.
Who's this by?
This is by Ernest Lawrence Thayer.
Thayer.
1888.
1888, okay.
The outlook wasn't brilliant for the Mudville Nine that day. The score stood 4-2 with but one inning more to play. And then when Cooney died at first and Barrows did the same, a sickly silence fell upon the patrons of the game. A straggling few got up to go in deep despair. The rest clung to that hope which springs eternal in the human breast. They thought that if only Casey could get a whack at that, we'd put up even money now with Casey at the bat.
Big hitter, big slugger.
And then there's about 8 or 9 stanzas in between that.
But he strikes out, right?
But he strikes out.
Yeah.
So let's see. This describes strike 3. They go through. They describe strike 1, strike 2, kill the umpire. That's the old saying. An old saying in baseball. Kill the umpire. You know, if he makes a call that's not in your team's favor.
Yeah.
Yeah. So after he called strike 2, the audience cried fraud. You know. Anyway, the last 2 stanzas. The sneer is gone from Casey's lip. His teeth are clenched in hate. He pounds with cruel violence his bat upon the plate. And now the pitcher holds the ball, and now he lets it go. And now the air is shattered by the force of Casey's blow. He missed the ball. Oh, somewhere in this favored land the sun is shining bright. The band is playing somewhere, and somewhere hearts are light. And somewhere men are laughing, and somewhere children shout. But there is no joy in Mudville. Mighty Casey has struck out.
Oh my, Fred. Unfortunately, as we know, in any sport, especially baseball, there's winners and losers.
Some gotta win, some gotta lose. Good time, Charlie's got the blues.
Whichever way it goes, you've got to encourage your children. Go back and try again.
Go back and try again.
Never give up.
And it's interesting, our filming today coincides with, we're in the thick of the Major League Baseball postseason.
Yes, we are.
Yeah.
With the playoffs. Well, that was fun.
That was a lot of fun. Any closing thoughts or anything? Things about what we're going to do in the future, or we'll just sign off?
I think we'll just sign off. We're gonna get back to loneliness and a few of the topics that we've been on in the past. But I think it's a good time for people to discover us if they haven't seen us before. Discover
your inner poet. I read a quote. Can't remember exactly how the first part goes, but you'll get the gist. In the face of love, everyone becomes a poet. Ooh. So explore your inner creative side, whether that be for poetry, artistic drawing, playing a musical instrument, songwriting. Explore it. It's like we said before, therapy. It's fun. One of my favorite words in the English language, fun. And we hope you have fun. And we hope you as Americans out there working your tails off, that you balance your work with play, rest, and fun, and social connection.
Yes, indeed. That's a wrap.
That's a wrap, my best friend.
Ciao.
Ciao.